All right, so with that, I welcome you to day two. Our next speaker will be Michael Korn, who is the Cybersecurity Advisor for Research Infrastructure in the Office of the Chief Officer for Research Facilities in the National Science Foundation. So welcome, Mike, and we'll put up your slides.
So enough. There we go. Fantastic. Well, thank you, everybody. I appreciate it. It's early in the morning. Well, actually, for those of you on the East Coast, it's late already. For some of you, it's early. And I'll summarize my entire talk in one sentence in case you want to leave and go get coffee. Security people and data management people need to work together more. Okay, thank you. It's been a good morning. I do realize, though, that there is, where we go. Let's try you. There we are. In some ways, I do need to apologize. When I was putting this together, I wrote this nice, very promising abstract about what I was going to talk about. And when I started to actually put the slides together, I realized this is the worst possible group for the talk I was planning, because you're all data professionals. You all work in cyber infrastructure. I'm not sure the message I have for you is one this group necessarily needs to hear. I suspect you're going to go, duh, when I'm done. But I'll go through it anyway. There's no big reveal here. It's just some observations as someone working in cybersecurity and data management. And I'm also going to show you toward the end what you can expect to see about data management in the cybersecurity section of the new rig, because I have added, I don't know, it's page and a half around data management. No new requirements, but information. A lot of the rig is guidance. So the rig is not so much a set of requirements, and I don't have any new requirements around data management, but it's advice to people that run facilities or are involved in this. And so that's where I've added some data management stuff as well. So let me talk for a little bit about, and I'll go through this fairly quickly because I want to have time for discussion. Whoops, it's not playing this properly, is it? The animation. If you want to know why I'm here, basically, I have been fortunate that I've worked at two major institutions, University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign and UC San Diego, that are very data forward. And so even though I've worked in cybersecurity my whole professional career, I've worked very closely with folks that are that lean into data management and provide a lot of data curation services to researchers. But unfortunately, out in the wild, so to speak, these tend to be parallel paths. And that was my nice little animation there in the center, two lines not intersecting each other. And I think that's a real problem, because I think what you're going to hear me talk a lot about is that I don't believe these are parallel problems. I think they're the same problem looked at from different angles, different perspectives. So what I was trying to get at is where we really need to end up is to have data management and cybersecurity working together toward the goal of open science is what we're really aiming for here. And this is usually the point in time when you're talking about two domains where someone puts up a Venn diagram showing you, this is cybersecurity and this is data management. And here's this little negotiated detente in the middle. I think this is nonsense. When you see a Venn diagram, they're great in certain contexts, but usually it's, this is mine, this is yours, and we're going to pretend to agree on the center part. And I just don't buy that. I think data management and cybersecurity are so coupled at the hip. Like I said, I think they're different reflections of the same problem. And so I'm not big on Venn diagrams. What I do think is a much more useful way to think about it is to think about, this isn't about ownership, but how the two fields can partner together. And the goal here is obviously open science. And open science has certain attributes and functions that must exist for open science to succeed. With the goal, obviously, here on the right, we're trying to accelerate discovery in science. We're trying to improve and have better science. That improves the trust in science. And then ultimately, I think trust in science leads to better national health and national competitiveness, which is why when I think of, for example, the major facilities, most of whom deal with, well, all of them deal with public open science, there's a huge national security component to what they do, because we're dealing with things like that affect the economy, that affect science, that affect our reputation nationally. So when I look at these elements that make up supportive open science, I don't see those as belonging to data management or cybersecurity. I see them as both. I think the image I probably should have created on a slide was, data integrity is a white beam going into a prism. It refracts out the prism, and you've got, on one end, you've got cybersecurity, the other end of the spectrum, you've got data management. But it's the same problem that they're trying to work or support. That's not to say that security professionals and data professionals see everything the same way. Now, I threw this together really quickly. You could probably argue with every single line. In fact, I think it would make an interesting tabletop session someday to sit down and debate sort of, for data management, what do these things mean? For cybersecurity, what do these things mean? I think there's a lot of nuance in this. But, just to go through these quickly, when I, as a cybersecurity, think of data integrity, I generally think about protecting data from malicious modification. I'm not sure that's the primary thing about data integrity that a data management person thinks of. I would tend to think that falls more into that data validation, reproducibility side of the spectrum. Access privileges. Cybersecurity people think about least privilege. What's the minimum amount of privilege you need to do something, or the minimum access you should have to something? Fundamentally, I think open science is literally the opposite. How do we get it out as much as possible to people? And it sounds obvious. These are obviously, again, opposite ends of a spectrum, but it's important to keep this in mind when you're working with your counterparts, or even if you're just wearing two hats at different times, that these are the assumptions that people bring to the problem set. Time horizons. I think cybersecurity professionals tend to think in terms of short time horizons. Is the data secure now? Is it in an archive? Can I forget about it? Whereas data management folks are thinking about data, even, the metadata around the data, even when the data is gone, the metadata still has value. It has this enormous long time horizon. And then, of course, scope. What I have on here is metadata equals data to a security professional. We don't see a difference. It's data. It needs to be protected. Why are we even calling it a different name? It's just stuff in a database. Whereas, data management folks, you have things like FAIR, which is the lingua franca for how we talk about data. It's all about metadata. Provenance is a difficult one. I don't think most security professionals know what provenance is. They go, isn't that part of France? Provenance is not a term that has a lot of valence among security professionals, but it is growing. You're finding more. There are a few places where you can connect with security professionals on this concept. One is chain of custody. We're very used to providing evidence and worrying about that chain of custody and what happened to it along the way. And there's a kind of provenance question there that goes to it. And provenance data is starting to show up in forensic analysis as sort of a term of art. So there are a lot of connections here. The last one I have on here is research integrity. Security professionals don't usually play a big role in research integrity unless it's worrying about insider threats. Usually when security professionals deal with research integrity, it's because somebody's audit, some sort of internal investigation comes to us for help understanding the forensic analysis of what's going on. Whereas research integrity, which is largely what we're now calling research security, it's a big part of that, and FAIR are very tightly coupled, obviously. So I did say in my bio, I would say something about FAIR. I don't have a lot to say about FAIR. I do think, from my perspective, and again, there are many people in the room here, most of you have more expertise in this than I do. I see FAIR as fundamentally being built on the back of metadata about research and the management of that metadata. And as a security professional, to me, I see that protecting the metadata from corruption as the thin the weakest link in the chain of data security. Because if I wanted to create huge havoc in the US in a science field, it's hard to change data. Scientists have all sorts of ways they test data as they're collecting it to make sure their instrumentation is working properly. But if we start building more and more of these science gateways and repositories grow, corrupting the metadata is really the sneaky way to start damaging and eroding confidence in science and the science itself. Data becomes lost if the metadata is lost. If it's inconsistent, you can't, the wrong people may have access to it. You can't get to it. And it goes on interoperability, and I put on here, reuse just sort of falls to the wayside. It's kind of like the best analogy I could think of is if I wanted to create havoc in the US, I wouldn't take down the water supply. I'd take down Google Maps. No one would ever get anywhere. Planes would fall from the sky as far as I know. So in any case, this is just to give you a perspective. There's probably an entire conference could be put together on FAIR and cybersecurity. But from my perspective, this is the thing that jumped out at me. I think I'm going to zip through these next few slides very quickly. I don't think I sewed them in here. This is I think you saw in one of the presentations yesterday a version of this. This is produced by CI Compass, showing sort of a generic high-level life's workflow for data. And then, of course, as this, you add on the things that cut across all of these different areas. These are the standard things. I do like to point out, though, that when you're looking for partnership with cybersecurity professionals, these are very good places to find partnership in these dimensions, because if you talk to security professionals, they are very, very concerned about issues like continuity of operations, continuity of observation, continuity of data collection. And you'll find many security professionals work in disaster recovery and business continuity, or at least that's become part of their portfolio. Whether it makes sense there or not is another issue, and as an organization matures, that tends to become its own function. But security professionals worry about disruption of operations due to malware attacks. So there's a lot of expertise there that you can use to partner with. But what I do want to say a little bit about, though, is how do we get to the point where cybersecurity professionals and data management people are working together? And the first step, I think, and this is for the security professionals, I think there's a world of education you have to put yourself through. I think if I walked up to most of my colleagues and again, not the people in the room, but enterprise security professionals, I said, what are you guys doing about DOIs? They'd go, you mean DOE? What? Huh? DOI? They wouldn't know what I was talking about. And similarly, when you're dealing with non-PII data that's sensitive, most of you probably deal with non-human data, but that doesn't mean you don't have exquisitely sensitive data in some of your data sets. Sometimes instrumentation picks up things that we don't want to be put into the public domain. Or you may pick up information around endangered species. This is sort of the canonical example. I've heard stories. I ran a workshop a few years ago. A researcher was who studied endangered sharks, was on a ship at sea. And one of the researchers she was with, tweeted out this cool photo. Look at where I am. This is great. And 2 days later, a Chinese trawler showed up and harvested all the sharks. So that's a worst case example, but poachers watch Facebook for pictures of endangered species and white tigers and things like this, and then go kill them. So there's a lot of this kind of stuff that is probably in some of your data sets, and most of you probably know what I'm talking about. Security professionals aren't typically used to thinking about this kind of data. So I think there's an education component. I do think where the partnership needs to start is managing or partnering on reviewing your data management and sharing plans. You notice I call it DMSP. NSF is labeling these from data management plans to data management and sharing plans to try to underscore this issue. But Now, I know many of you are, if you're at a large facility, you may have security professionals, you may have people that specialize in data management. Many of you are at mid-scale or smaller. You don't have that kind of separation of duties. But it's good to ask around and try to get as much partnership as you can in reviewing your DMSPs. You'd be surprised how willing security people are to sit down and look at those workflows with you. Look at as things move through your workflow, as they get handed off to repositories. There's a lot of ground to plumb there. And then the last point is that you need to start asking yourself questions about data integrity. Maybe I'm again already preaching the choir here, but workflows are complex. I mean, what was I heard yesterday? All the DOI references, there were 300 of them in your publication. How would you recognize data integrity problems as any one of those? How would you recognize, and you may do that fine for your data, but again, how would you recognize data integrity problems in your metadata? Asking questions like this is really a gateway to sort of exposing challenges that you've got. I do want to give you one quick slide. I'm getting close to being done because I want to leave a little time. I did add, like I said, a passage in the new RIG guidance on data management. It's a section on data management and curation. And for those of you that aren't familiar with the RIG, it's the guidance on what NSF expects for you for running a facility. The cybersecurity section is now called the Information Assurance Supplement, and it's gone from a few pages to probably 15 or so, and describes how we expect you to run a program. It's not highly prescriptive. We're very cautious about adding requirements into the RIG, obviously, because requirements bring up funding questions and all sorts of other obligations. There's a few new things in it. But really what I'm doing in the data management section of the RIG, because that's not really my swim lane, I'm not writing a whole supplement on data management. I've just added a few points that we want you to think about. And this is primarily for the management. Address the cybersecurity implications in the DMSP, which means sitting down with your security people and thinking it through. Make sure you've identified, and this is kind of really for the folks that are just getting into this, where your data management expertise is. If you're at a university, it's probably in your library. That's where I've always worked with folks. But if you're in a larger separate organization, who knows where it could be? You may have to hunt it down. Keep an eye on the public access memorandum, because I don't remember exactly, but don't we have to like the end of the year basically to get our act together on this? Things are getting really down to the wire. Take a look at those interfaces between data repositories and your workflows. Make the effort of figuring out what parts of your data have very high data integrity challenges. You know, data security people love talking about data classification. Is it sensitive? Is it highly sensitive? Is it public? That's a pain in the butt. But you do need to sit down and look at your data and ask, where are the data integrity risks in this data, very specifically, and try to enumerate those. And then again, look for your that sort of hidden sensitive information. I'm finding that almost every facility I talk to has this issue. They just don't talk about it very much. I was talking to the folks at Neon a month or so ago, and they were talking about how they have to hide some of the metadata around endangered species in their sampling. So they've developed strategies, and everyone has to think about this. I've only got two more things I want to say. One is I want to emphasize that nobody expects, and NSF certainly does not expect you to have perfect cybersecurity. You can't. In the modern world, it's impossible. The CIA gets hacked. The FBI gets hacked. Everyone's going to get hacked. It's called being in the modern world. But what you're really striving for is resilience in your facility, which means that you want to stop the stupid, easy stuff from happening. You want to make sure when something bad happens, it can't spread through the entire facility. And you want to do this because it's going to minimize the disruption of your operations. You know, everyone's going to get hit by ransomware at some point. If it knocks you offline for 6 months, that's really bad. If it knocks you offline for 3 days and you're back in business, that's a success story. You should be bragging about that. So basically, the whole point here is we are not shooting for perfection. Nobody expects you to be perfect, but try to be resilient is what we're shooting for. And then I've given you a bunch of resources, and you'll see I've made fun of my friends at CI Compass here in the upper right. When I did a search on cybersecurity on their website, it did not come back with a lot of data. That's right. That's right. It's all hidden, right? Just some hodgepodge of things that I came across that I find very useful when I'm reading about this. There is a surprising amount of information around science gateways and securing science gateways, which is really useful, and some of it's really excellent. But there's shockingly little research I was able to find on FAIR and metadata and cybersecurity. So in any case, it could be something to focus on or work on, perhaps a work group or something. So that's all I had to say. I don't know how I did on time. Oh, there we go. Well, thank you.